The purpose of the clipping mask in Illustrator is to hide any part of our artwork that we don't want to appear in the final illustration. In this case, we have a 4x4-inch artboard, and some of our artwork falls outside of the edge of our artboard and overlaps onto the gray pasteboard area. There's a couple of things that we need to do to prepare our artwork to apply the clipping mask. In this case, there's a template layer with an image on that layer. This image was used to trace over to create our artwork. This is not something that we want to appear in our final illustration. So I'm going to toggle the visibility so that we turn that layer off. Next thing we need to do is to group our artwork on our artboard. As it is now, all of these objects are separate and each one needs to be selected individually. Well, in order to hide our artwork using the mask, we need to be able to select all of it at once. So I'm going to drag a selection over all of the artwork, right-click, and choose Group. So now when I select anywhere within that group, and let's say I would decide to move that artwork, it's all going to move together. The next thing we're going to do is choose a path that we're going to use as our mask. In this case, since we have a square artboard and I would like to mask out anything that falls outside of that artboard, I'm going to choose the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle that goes from one edge to the other of our artboard. Now I happen to have a white fill on this rectangle and no stroke applied, and it doesn't matter whether there's a fill or a stroke or whether it's set to none, because once we apply the clipping mask, this object is going to become invisible. So again, the fill and stroke settings don't matter. The next thing that we need to do is to select both objects, both the object that we're using as a mask and then the object below it, which is going to be masked out. So in order for the clipping mask to work, it's got to be above the object that it's masking out in the stack. So since the clipping mask object is already selected, all I need to do now is just hold the Shift key and select the object that I would like to mask. Once I have both objects selected, I right-click somewhere inside the selection and choose Make Clipping Mask. And not only does the object that I drew to make the clipping mask disappear, but also the part of our artwork that we want to hide also disappears. So now we have an illustration with a nice clean edge. Now let's say we decided that after we create our clipping mask, or after we apply our clipping mask, that we needed to make some kind of a modification to our artwork. We needed to add something or change it or whatever. Well, you can't modify artwork that's had a clipping mask applied to it, but what you can do is you can choose Undo Make Clipping Mask, and your artwork goes right back to where it was before you applied it in the first place. Another option is to choose Release Clipping Mask, which it releases the mask, but the mask is no longer available, and if you would want to reapply it, you'd have to recreate the object that you used as the mask. So in this case, I'd have to redraw my my rectangle. So I'll go ahead and do that. and go through the same steps in order to make the clipping mask. And that is how you make a clipping mask in Illustrator.